The opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi everybody, welcome to this week's episode of #NoFilter. I'm Ruchika Binder. We are talking about parent-teen conflict, parent-teen dynamics. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of #NoFilter. We have with us our guest panelist today, Rameet Singh. She is a mental health facilitator, healer, therapist. She is also a certified yoga teacher. She also takes therapeutic classes for those that need emotional healing through yoga and dance. So welcome to our show, Ms. Singh.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you on. We also have our teen celebrity panelists, as I like to call them, Nitka, Viren, and
Mark.
Introduce yourself today, Mark. Okay, so we are talking about parent and teen dynamics. That's, I think, a very important relationship dynamic, and especially I think when you're a teenager, there's a lot of hustle bustle, push and pull. What do you have to say about it? Why is it so important?
So the relationship we have with our family and our parent is one of the most important relationships we are actually going to ever have.
Okay.
And why this is we come into this world as an infant, and the only way we know what life is about, who we are, what the world is the world safe, is through what? Relationships.
Relationships, right.
With who? Our primary caregivers. First, our mom and our dad. And so there's such a strong emotional and psychological and physiological bond with our parents in terms of relationships. And that actually continues throughout when we reach the age of adulthood. Okay. So as a teenager, we are going through certain developmental tasks. What does it mean for me to be in the world and become independent, to make my own rules? What does it mean for me to be having these intense emotions as a teen? And how is that handled by the world? And if our parents can show us that I can receive your emotions, that I can be okay with what you're going through and help you through it, then teen is going to learn and have the belief system that it's okay for me to have these experiences, right?
And go through the crazy teenage years.
And they learn.
Right.
They learn.
So have you guys, I'm sure this is a common topic with all teens, a lot of teens have tweeted us about it too. What is the dynamic? What is that struggle?
I mean, there's always going to be problems, you know, that's life, that's the way things work. But at the end of the day, your parents always want what's best for you, whether you think it's best for you or not. And I think a lot of the problems that we have with our parents, hopefully there's not too many, but a lot of the problems we have with our parents stems from the fact that our parents want us to be adults and they want to be able to treat us like adults, but at the same time they kind of treat us like children because they don't want us to grow up, right? So things like curfew and whatnot, that kind of restricts us from being adults that they want us to be.
Is this touching a soft spot? Okay. I just wanted to put that out there. I just felt like it touched this top spot. Okay. So do you feel like somewhere the push and pull happens because you're trying to sort of be an adult, you're trying to explore these things, and then at the same time, as he said, they almost have this childlike regulation. So where does that sort of push and pull come in?
Push and pull, absolutely. At that time, the teenagers trying to get at that sense of anatomy, the autonomy. They want to be able to make their own rules. Right. But at the same time, they still need some structure because they're in that age of not being quite an adult and not being a child either. So it's so stressful and it can be very challenging for parents to know how much freedom, how much trust can I give to them that they're safe, and how much do I have to regulate? And that's going to be a constant struggle that requires dialogue.
I think that's really important. I think communication is something that whenever we think about family dynamics, I think that's an aspect. Either the teens feel like they can't communicate enough, or I hear a lot of parents say, well, my teen doesn't communicate with me. Do you guys feel like communication is more challenging with your parents during these years?
Yeah, it really is. Like our parents, for all of us actually, they've all grown up in a different generation, right? So it's you know, the way that they've been brought up and they've been interacting with their parents and their friends and whatever is much different than we do. You know, now that technology is such a big influence on us, it's you know, how we interact with our friends is like, our parents are like, why are you always on your phone? Why is it this? Like, so it's just a big, it's really important, like you said, to communicate, and it's easier said than done. But it is really important just to communicate and say, you know, this is what is popular. You might have not you know, done it in your time, but this is what we do. And
does it bother you to have rules in place? Do you almost feel like that's taking away from your teen experience or your freedom?
I feel like rules, they do give me sort of a guideline as to what is good and what is not good. So, but sometimes I feel like as teens, we do try to manipulate those rules and try to find out, you know, what exactly is our limit and what is our standing point.
Do you think for parents, there comes a point where they feel like there's an emotional disconnect, right, with their kids, where they feel like their kids no longer want to take their advice, they want to take the advice of everybody else but their parents, you know, even their aunt, their teacher, anybody but mom and dad. Mom and dad, you don't know anything. How can we resolve that conflict? How can we start, from a parent's point of view, it just hit me, how can we start building that trust again with these troublemaker teens that we have, to build again that relationship and have them sort of take a little bit of our advice and our trust?
This is such an important point that you're making here, because if a teen feels that they're not going to be understood, respected, they're going to be criticized, and they won't be able to be received for what they have to say, expressing from their hearts towards their parents, there's a belief system that's there that's already creating the disconnect.
Right.
So where does the belief system actually come from? That my parents can't really receive all that I have to share. It comes from a timeline, a series of events that happened as a child was growing up, right? But if the teen feels that I have an emotional, cognitive, subconscious memory that when I go to my parents and I'm angry or upset, that they can receive that without rejecting me, then you already have an open line of communication.
I think that fear, right? Once that fear is kind of taken away, then they're more easily likely to approach.
So that's what really needs to happen with
Nika,
them.
do you have anything to say on that?
For me, I have a great relationship with my parents, and I think the reason for that is that from the very beginning, from whenever I remember, my parents always used to tell me whenever they could that they loved me, however they could. They'd be like, "Oh, Nisa, I love you, like they're here." Like, they would always tell me, and I feel like because of that, I can tell them whatever I want. And if they didn't do that, I would feel like if I said something, that they would judge me, and I wouldn't feel confident to go and tell them. Because the last thing you want when you talk to someone is to be judged, and that's not a comfortable place to be in.
But then from a devil's advocate point of view, someone can say, I've received so much love from my parents that I'm scared to disappoint them, you know, to approach them with a failure of mine, or to approach them with, hey, something wrong happened. So
that's actually a myth, because there's this thing called unconditional love.
Okay.
And so when you've made a mistake and you've had the memory of the parent not yelling at you, but really saying what happened when you made that mistake, that I still love you, but let's work on this together.
That's kind of there to help you through it.
Yeah, and I've heard parents say that, if I give them too much love or nurturance, they're not going to be able to, be strong individuals, and that's a complete, actually, that's a myth, yeah.
Okay, so we are debunking lots of myths in family communication. Stay tuned on the other side of the break, everyone. Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, we were talking with Rameet Singh and our teen panelists about the family dynamics and the parent-teen relationship drama, as I like to call it. So, Rameet, before the break, we were talking about this idea of building trust. I think there's a two-way relationship, right? Your kids or the teens need to feel like they can trust to go up to their parents and even say, listen, you've showered me with unconditional love. I failed. Here's my first failure in life. And I think sometimes teens don't realize that failure is going to come. And I think their parents know that deep down and have come to realize that failure is a part of life because they've gone through it. And I think for parents as well, sometimes they almost say that they want to live their life through their teens, so they never want to see their kids fail. Wow. So they're extra hard. So in terms of trust, how can that play into a successful communication?
Well, the most important thing is to develop trust is how you're relating to yourself in life in general, as a parent and as a teenager. Right? So as a parent, can you trust that you're doing the best job that you can do? Can you trust that your teenager is a human being who has the potential to learn, to grow, what we call the growth potential, that they can make mistakes, but they can also learn from that as well?
And it's okay to make mistakes.
So it's like we have this constant anxiety sometimes about life and about teenagers, but it's actually a reflection of the anxiety that we have within ourselves. maybe from the lack of forgiveness from our own mistakes we haven't made. So to develop a good relationship from, you know, just a teen and a parent actually starts with how you are with your own relationship, self-love and self-care.
I think that's really important. We never think about that.
And when you can make that right, the relationship with yourself, your inner child that's wounded, how can you heal that? Every relationship starts to fall into place. It's really true.
Your surroundings kind of change with you. So as teens, do you guys like filter what you tell your parents? You're like, hey, I'm going to tell you that I'm here, but I'm not going to tell you the rest of it, or I'm going to communicate with you, but I'm only going to communicate up to the amount that I think I'm communicating, and then your parents are so happy because they're like, my son or daughter is this great effective communicator. It's okay, guys, your parents are not going to watch this segment. I'll tell them for 5 seconds not to tune in.
Well, with interacting with my friends, I know for a fact that they do filter themselves. But for me, I feel like I'm the odd one out always. That if I don't say something to my parents, it's like I have a rock on me. And until I don't say that to them, it's just going to be a weight on me.
Can you, even negative things, like things that have maybe gone wrong, or, you know, struggles, or
everything.
an error you've done, do you feel a fear, though, to be like, guys, like I did this, like this happened?
Well, my family environment is in a way that you can say whatever you want. You know, and I think that's very important to have in a family. And if that's not there, then kids are going to filter themselves. And, you know, I give them the right, in a way, to do that, because you know, if the parents don't do their role, then how do you expect their child to do that, you know?
Well, what happens when, you know, any of you go and tell your parents something and you have an open space of communication and your parents take it but they're upset and they don't agree with you? Where does your kind of sort of decision-making or wanting to tell them something again happen?
Well, I mean, I think that's a natural reflex of the parents, and, you know, it might make the child not want to come back again. But the child has to understand that, you know, those are your parents, and they will be the people who will love you no matter what will happen. And they will be there, hopefully, for the majority of, like, your life. And that if friends, they might leave you. Parents will never leave you, you know. They will always be there, even if you think they're not there.
I think in the back of the mind, as teens, we need to remember where family stands, as you said at the start, right? They were there from the beginning. Rameet, my question is, what about females versus males? Is there a difference in terms of how teens are treated by being a boy versus being a girl? Is there sort of something is that still an issue that you would see, that you've seen in your practice, or that you've heard about when you deal with teens and family?
Well, you know what? It has a lot to do with culture as well.
Okay.
The reality is that some cultures treat women and men much more differently.
Absolutely.
Right?
Unfortunately.
Right, and it's also based on the individual family and their belief systems as well.
Okay.
Right? That boys have certain treatments or girls have certain treatments. And also the fact of society that women may encounter more sexual abuse or certain kinds of abuses, right? And there's more fear around that.
So do you feel like parents are more protective in general towards females?
Yes.
Do you feel like that's something that's sort of stagnant across all cultures that you've seen in your therapy?
Well, what I've noticed is that they feel like they have the responsibility, sometimes more for the daughter
than the son. Yeah, I think that's.
And sometimes there's just like this comparison that happens as well. That my brother has more freedom than me, and he's young, and he can get away with things. And why can't I? Why can't I do that? So sometimes the resentment starts to build up as well, and it's really challenging, you know? And sometimes the parents do that unconsciously because they bring that from their own ancestry lineage, from their own parents.
And they don't realize what they're doing along the way.
So the task is to make the unconscious conscious, to really see why am I saying what I'm saying to my daughter or son? What is their response? What's actually happening here?
Do any of you have brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I have a brother.
And you have a sister?
I have a brother.
Brother?
I have a brother.
Okay, so you have a brother as well, right? Okay, so I'm going to pick on you because it's boy-girl. Do you feel like there's ever any difference? Have your parents ever restricted you towards doing anything, or said like, okay, you're a girl, you know, making an exception?
Nothing major that I would get upset about. But I mean, there is like the tiny little things that it's like, oh, maybe you shouldn't go out alone at this time right now. And
So
I
a
feel
safety
like that's
aspect?
reasonable, you know, but nothing like oh, you shouldn't like go out at like 2 o'clock right now, like your brother should, you know.
You go out at 2 in the morning?
No, sorry, at 2 o'clock like in the
I
afternoon.
hope you're in bed at 2 in the morning. I'm in bed at 2 in the morning, and I'm 26.
In the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you? You have 2 brothers, so you probably never felt this, right?
Well, there is sort of like the
Older versus younger brother?
older versus younger, right? So the older can get away with some more things that the younger can do, but I feel like it is what, you know, how you interact with your parents and what they, how much they trust you and how much they, you know, allow you to do what you want to do, but also, you know, still coincide with what they want to do and what they say is right and wrong.
Rameet,
right?
that makes me think of another aspect. I find a lot of the first siblings say like, oh, I hate being the oldest teen because everyone's hard on me and I have to do everything, and the younger one gets away. So, and that's again something that's built up, right, between parents. Do you feel like over time it's sort of this thing where the older kid always feels the pressure, the older teen always feels like mom and dad are expecting so much from me?
Well, I'm the youngest, and I've seen what my oldest has gone through.
Right.
And that actually seems to be reality.
Yeah.
And she said to me that first child was, they were trying to figure things out. Right.
So they also didn't know how much as parents they wanted to give and the freedom, right? They're learning along their way too.
Yeah, and the first child, sometimes there's a lot more challenges.
Right.
Economic, trying to figure things out. And as a first child, not only do you have responsibility for your parents sometimes, because sometimes a role switch where you have to be the parent for the child, especially if there's a mental health issue, and the parent, which is actually, you know, something that really occurs. But they also have to be responsible for their sibling as well. So there is a lot of pressure on the older child when they have several siblings, from what I've seen.
Right.
Especially when they're home, there's intensity, there's a lot of chaos.
Okay. On the other side of the break, we are going to talk about how mental health plays into family dynamics, especially in a relationship between a parent and teen. Hi everyone, welcome back to #NoFilter. I'm Ruchika Bindra. Rameet, what about mental health? And now I don't mean, everyone's probably thinking mental health like if as a teen you're going through depression or anxiety or any sort of mental health issue. I think that's something we all know there's support and you can get from. But what if the roles are reversed? What if I'm a teenager and I come from a household where my parents are going through mental health issues? I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about.
I think this is such a common occurrence actually.
Okay, who would have thought?
And there's so much stigma around it, even labeling that my mom has depression or my dad has whatever, an addiction or bipolar, right? And so when the teen keeps that to themselves and they can't figure out what's actually going on here or get any kind of help, it takes a huge toll on the self-esteem and mental health of the teen as well. And what actually ends up happening when a parent does have a mental health issue, the roles start to reverse.
Right.
And the teen has to take on the role of an adult for a little while. And that's the nature of reality sometimes in our family relationships. Roles start to switch around, and the teen has to take on that responsibility. But what they really need to know, if the parent is having some kind of mental health issue, emotional issue, anxiety, whatever, is for them to not take it personally and think that it's about them. For example, if the mom is not able to really give that love to her teen or really validate her for something she's done, he or she might take it as a rejection.
Right, my mom doesn't like me or I'm not good enough.
Yeah, and that's so easy. But at that moment to just say, wait a minute, it's not really about me, it's that they can't be present for themselves.
Right.
And that's what's happening. So when you create that realization and recognition and label what's happening to my parent, to not take it personally, to create your own boundary, then get some psychoeducation and get the therapy that you need, find the person that can talk to them, and also self-care, because it's very challenging for teens to be having to play the role of a teen and a parent as well. So self-care, self-care.
And I think it's also true, you touched on a point, we have this idea growing up, right, from a young age, our parents are heroes. There's a heroism behind it.
Yes.
So sometimes a lot of teens don't want to accept that at the end of the day, they're individuals too. They're two individuals that are trying to, you know, build something, so they're going to have their own issues. And in some cases like this, they may have a mental health issue or they may suffer a depression or you know, I was working on a community project a few years ago, and I met a teen, and I said, you know, she seemed really distraught, and she said, well, I'm really upset, my parents have financial issues. And I said, that's also an issue, right? And a lot of teens don't know how to deal with that.
Absolutely.
And they're like, you know, I can't get this, or I can't buy that. So as you said, realizing that there's not something wrong with you, not that, you know, your parent doesn't want to give you something, but more realizing that there's a deeper issue and life happens, I think is really, really important as well. I don't think it's something, you know, we think about as teens. We're always quick to blame them and expect from them, but we don't realize that they too have their own lives, right, simultaneously. So I think that dynamic is important too. Have you guys ever sort of sat there and said, okay, well, they're parents too, but they're individuals as well?
I think, like, going back to the whole teens having to play their parents' role, I think it's really hard because as a teen, you're kind of in a transition period from a child to an adult. So you already have like your own things you're trying to do. You're trying to go to school. You're trying to maybe get a job. You're trying to deal with other people. So there's a lot of different things that are going on. And then if you have to take on the role of a parent, that's just extra stress and extra weight on your shoulders that really isn't typical of a teenager having on them at that point in life, because you're trying to learn so much and then you have to take on an extra role. It's so much stress and so much extra baggage that you're going through and like you're taking with you.
But unfortunately, it's the nature of life. Some people have struggle when they're younger versus older, right? If only we could have everything in a perfect timeline, I think that's what it comes down to, right? Unfortunately, nobody wants that situation. Everybody wants to enjoy being a kid, being an adult, being a teen, being a kid, being a, you know, wife, being a mom. But these are part of the part and parcel of this beautiful journey of life. I sound like a poet today.
Yeah, and I mean, at that time, the teen is in survival mode. And they're just trying to survive and help their parents. But it's only later on, sometimes a year, 2 years, 3 years after, where that emotion that they went through catches up on them. And that's when you really need to get the therapy or whatever help you need to get. And that's the reality of it.
So, Rameet, what do you recommend for our teens watching? You know, in terms of family conflicts and dynamics, what are 5 tips you can give just in general to have a successful relationship with your parents so you can, you know, enjoy your teenage years? B, kind of what can they do or what shouldn't they do? And for parents that are tuning in, is there any tips you have for them?
Absolutely. So when you're fighting and you're in a conflict, and I tell you, okay, just take 3 steps back, take a breath, try to keep your cool. That's like telling you guys to stop a train on its track.
It's not going to
And
stop.
sometimes I read it in books, and I'm like, listen, when I'm angry, I'm furious. I can't stop at that time. It's like telling a basketball player how to learn a new skill while they're playing the game. So what I recommend is, how is your internal environment before you're in the conflict with your parents? What's happening to you on a mental, emotional, and psychological level before you encounter a conflict? And that's what I really want to talk about and say right now, that what I would recommend for a teen and for a parent who are wanting to have a good relationship is to develop the skills of and cultivate the qualities of self-compassion, of healing the wounds that are active within you from that moment, and to create a certain level of harmony and balance within yourself. So then when you are in a conflict, what's going to happen is that you're not going to be reacting from an older wound or a projection, but you're going to be reacting from a place of seeing clearly, clarity, and self-love.
Because you're not bringing old issues to the surface.
Because that's actually what an argument is. It's nothing but a projection of our own world with another person. It's actually never really about the other person.
Which is true. I like how you think it's an argument is a projection of our world versus theirs.
Because we can't see through the lens of the parent or what they're actually thinking. But we assume that they're saying this because they're upset with us. But no, they're just something else
from
is
their
happening.
world, their viewpoint. Okay. As teens, do you guys have any advice that you could give our teens watching? I know I rarely ask you guys, so you're all stumped with this, but.
I would say just the most important thing is really just to talk to your parents, just to really
start the talk.
Yeah, really just communicate. That's the number one thing, to understand their viewpoint on things and understand where we come from. So it's just to understand that the difference between what we feel and what they feel is really just a way that we can just stop all these conflicts from happening, because we have already had this initial conversation.
Mark, do you have a quick thing?
I just want to add to that. When you're talking to your parents, it doesn't really have to be some deep emotional issue that you have right off the bat. Just simple, how was your day, what's going on in your life.
Right, just be lighthearted, just talk normally. Not everything needs to be a heated sort of debate, and I like that. I think a lot of the times if we're upset with our parents or we had an argument, we come home and we're like, I don't want to even talk to them at all. Why not just a hi, hello, how are you? What about you, Nika?
I would just say, always remember that your parents love you the most, and nothing will change that. No matter what you do in this world, your parents
they're always
going
to be there.
Yeah.
I think she put a great closing. At the end of the day, family dynamics are a part and parcel of being a teen and eventually about being in this beautiful world. So communicate, talk, build compassion, and as Rameet said, remember an argument is just two people's viewpoints. Thank you for watching, everybody.